This episode is brought to you by Flowfuse, the industrial application platform that helps operations, maintenance, and IT teams connect any machine, move data between systems, and scale industrial applications across sites. It's built on Node-RED with the security and governance you need for real production environments. Learn more at flowfuse.com. Welcome to Unplugged, an IIoT podcast where we dive into the fascinating world of industrial Internet of Things and automation. I'm your host, Phil Seboa.
G'day, Phil, and hello, everyone. My name's Ed Fuentes. Well, Phil, you know, you and I are very passionate around IIoT and Industry 4, but what's really interesting today, especially with our guest, Francisco, is bringing in the manufacturing, which he has solid experience in, which we'll talk about today, the software aspect, and Industry 4.0, that intersection of all those scenarios, especially on MES. And what's going to be interesting today, Phil, talking with Francisco, will be about his take on AI, understanding how AI is revolutionizing what it's doing, especially around MES, which he has a lot of experience in. So I'm very, very keen to see what his opinions are, what his thoughts are. He's seen to be a bit of a thought leader in this space as well. And as you and I know, the medical industry and semiconductor industry are massive growing industries. So I'd be keen to see how Francisco is seeing this play out. So yeah, I'm very happy to have Francisco here today and talk to him this podcast.
Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure being here with you, and look forward to answering your questions.
Awesome. I guess we'll give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself as well and give us a bit of a background on critical manufacturing and how you got started.
Okay, very well. So yeah, I'm an electrical engineer, but I always loved software and manufacturing. After some experience in R&D institutes, I joined semiconductor industry. So I was part of a factory here in Portugal. So I did not say this. I'm Portuguese, and so I live in Porto area in Portugal. And we had an investment in the semiconductor area from Siemens many years ago, and I started working there around 97. It's been quite some time. So I work there in the software area. So semiconductor is a very sophisticated manufacturing space to be in. And I dedicated to developing several different areas in terms of software for the manufacturing semiconductor space. Until in 2009, the company that I was working for went insolvent. And so I had a quite large team that I was working on. The main core were commercial products, and we were just developing things around this commercial core, and we'll deploy this into different factories of the world. And I had a quite large team. So my team there at the time had around 150 people, and I had to fire them all from one day to the other. And so I decided at that point, together with a few other colleagues, that this could not be the end of this, just because on one side, we had a lot of people and everyone was available. And at the same time, we were not very happy with the flexibility of the tools, the commercial tools that we were working with at the time. And we said, there's space for us to do a little bit better. And so we decided to, starting to put our thoughts together, creating a business plan. I had done an MBA, a few years before, which was very handy at the time. Created this business plan, started looking for investors, and we ended up creating critical manufacturing in 2009. So the idea was to build a new manufacturing execution system from scratch. So I'm sure we'll have time to discuss exactly what this means. And then, semiconductor space was the original one because it's an area that we knew the best, an area which is very sophisticated and cannot really work. It's impossible to produce anything without systems like those. And so that's how we started. And then, like in a normal startup, nothing happened as it should in the early years. All our plans, it's really interesting to look back at my original business plan. It was formally very well done because I had done an MBA recently, but it was, I was so naive at the time, and everything that I thought I would do, almost nothing happened, at least at the right time. And so we had a few years in which we struggled. We went through a lot of hiccups, and then almost by magic, after a few years, things started to work the right way. And then evolve until what we do today. So today, Critical Manufacturing is a company that has around 650 employees, with people, in Asia, North America, Europe, and developing solutions, which in the meantime deviated a bit from just the original MES into the connectivity space, the IoT space, automation, and into the analytics portion. Again, these last years with a lot of AI. And beyond semiconductor, we went as well into electronics, medical device, and industrial equipment segments. Yeah, so sorry for the long intro, but that gives you kind of a glimpse about where I come from, and what is critical manufacturing and where we are today.
That's good, Francisco. I want to take you back to that 2009 time you mentioned. You were working there at the semiconductor factory of the Siemens in Portugal. You've been there maybe 12 years by now, and like you said, it just one day to another just closed up. Had you been able to see how the other manufacturing plants globally were doing? Because semiconductor is, in my mind anyway, quite a progressive industry. Was there much disparity between what other countries or other factories were doing, or were they all the same? Or what were the gaps you were noticing that even then?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was very closed off, right? So I did not know much beyond semiconductor. Of course, I had the notion that it was a really sophisticated vertical to be in, but I really didn't know, how much sophistication we were in before I started looking to the other verticals already within critical manufacturing. So of course, I had some experience before in some more classical shop floor type of manufacturing areas. Again, 1 year before I started joining Siemens at the time, and yes, I knew that there were really some gaps in terms of technology. But again, only when I started trying to see how would our solution fit other industries, and you say, well, we have kind of an arsenal of possible solutions. And most of what we have to do is try to look into possible simplifications so that we don't overwhelm these other manufacturers with a lot of things that they might need at some time, but they likely don't need right now.
Yeah. And that's the journey, I think, that I see a lot in that space where you, as the specialist in a particular area, know what could fix that company up. But it's getting them to do something with that knowledge and moving to the next step. I suppose early on in your days, was that some of the challenges you were facing?
Yeah, absolutely. So many times we say this, and even now with AI, it's even more clear, which is we say, the technology is ready, but the factories are not. And this means that they have to really go through, a journey of levels of maturity before this becomes even a problem for them that they want to resolve, and so that they understand how they would be able to benefit from it. And so every time that we try to accelerate this and deploy simply technology for factories that are not at the right level of maturity, it never ends up well.
Yeah, I guess MES is many things to many people, and even more so as we start moving towards AI. Like, I can see, just in the past 3 years, pretty much everything being put into to that bucket. So what do you see? Like, how could you describe MES pre-AI and during this evolution towards AI?
Okay, very good. So the MES originally has to do basically with some level of process control and guidance That's kind of the first basic level, right? So we want to make sure that whatever is being produced is produced the right way according to the rules that have been established, and to guide, especially operators or any type of manual instructions, to guide operators through the right ways to do things. Okay, so this is one of the main pillars. The second one is to get the right level of traceability. Okay, this is very important, of course, especially in regulated environments. But we really want to track and record everything that happens to those materials, to those products, to those processes, so that you can learn from it, so that you can register and make sure that when you sell it, you did things the right way and prove that you have done that the right way. The third is, once you do this, you gain some level of visibility into the operations. And if you gain some visibility of the operations, then of course you can then use that to try to optimize your operations. Okay, so that's the third pillar. And maybe the fourth is that how can you do all of those and be sufficiently flexible to quickly seize windows of opportunity for new processes, new products, new customers. Okay, so that's kind of the core. And so the way you do this is you and today we talk frequently about digital twins and things like that. So what we do is we have in a computer system, we map certain processes that exist within the manufacturing plants. Now, those processes originally, when MES was created, were basically physical processes. So the transformation that happened throughout the flows of a given factory, and then it quickly became not just the physical processes, but also the business processes. And so the MES is essentially that, right? And of course, depending on the level of granularity that you want to map such processes, the MES can be simpler or can be, quite complex. So that's the core. And then we evolve into two other areas. One is that, especially when the machinery that produces that helps producing those products are sophisticated, they have data, they have interfaces. You can gather information, and you can also tell the machines what to do. And so the equipment connectivity, edge solutions, automation comes from that angle, and it becomes, quite one of the major pillars next to the MES. And then once you get data coming from equipment, data coming from MES, and you want to store all that information and you want to generate insights from that information, you get to the third pillar, which is, in our case, we call it a data platform, but this is the analytics portion. Okay, and this forms the trio of main solutions. So we see we're already a little bit far away from the original MES definition, right? It started small and then it evolves into this big thing. Now, the main problem is that people still understand this as MES. And so there's no other term. And so we get in with MES, and then we have to explain all the things that this evolved into, so that they can, really grasp, all the possible benefits that such a system can bring to them. I hope it was not too confusing.
They're the steps, Francisco. The steps that people go through, and you would have done this as you through the journey with critical manufacturing and seeing how these steps are implemented, how they are then, I suppose, developed at that site. What tools have you helped customers with to get these three functions through to get an outcome? And typically, what sort of time does it take to get that? Because when a company goes down the layer, like you mentioned, MES, and they see the story, they see the PowerPoint, they see what other people are doing, but then there's a gap between what they have and to get here. Are you seeing it shorten? Is it as long as before? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think, starting from the end, maybe today with AI, there's big potential to accelerate this. But it's always difficult because essentially just talking about the core MES, when I mentioned mapping processes, just the mapping processes part, an MES like ours has something like 30 plus different modules. right? So it's almost like an ERP just for the factory. And so, just trying to map all of those and trying to map all the processes that exist sometimes, and especially when there's no tools before, there's knowledge which is scattered around the production floor, sometimes captured in documents, sometimes captured in Excel sheets, sometimes only captured in people's heads. So this is very difficult to capture all of this within a certain time frame. So one of the things that we do with our customers is that part of our process, and it's very funny because the original portion, we call it envisioning. Okay, and the envisioning, we do two things. The first thing that we do is we try to say, okay, so let's grab what we have and try to map it to your reality, so that within a very short period of time, people can see their factory mapped out into the system. And then we start thinking, okay, so now you have some ideas in mind. Now you saw what the products can originally do. And now let's unlock what we see the future looking like. And then we start mapping out different phases, different processes, using different modules and so on. So I can tell you that an MES deployment can be, originally for an MVP as fast as something that happens within 3 months period, but it can last 5 years or more, depending on, the amount of things that people want to do with it. Okay, so that's why it's difficult. And sometimes we're talking about MES implementations and so on, and maybe talking about very different animals depending on the extent of the digital transformation that you want to implement.
Yeah, is an MES ever done?
No. It's a great question, because no, especially if it's well done. Even if you bring a company, a service provider, a consultant, whatever, to come up and do the first deployment, the MES is only worthwhile if the customer themselves own this and make this theirs, right? And they should use this to evolve their continuous improvement plans. And as they evolve and as they have the basis to now see exactly what is the impact of what they're doing, they can strategize and implement the improvements and then freeze it again with the control processes that the MES provides. And this is an infinite cycle. It's forever. It's like, there's no coming back. And so it's very funny when people say, let's do an ROI of an MES and so on. Yes, that's perfect. They can do an ROI for the first implementation and what they gain immediately in terms of, visibility, productivity, and whatever. But then there's going to be both improvements and costs during their entire life while the MES is still in place.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. The visibility portion when you're implementing these MES platforms is something that basically they're not always ready to bring into their processes, right? Like if you're making bad products, you'll actually see that you're making bad products. And so you have to take that as the ROI on that deployment so that you can then do continuous improvement. That's the whole idea of the platform.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing is that you're right, that level of visibility, especially when you get the hard facts that come from such systems, and particularly when you have the combination of the equipment integration with the MES. And, for instance, they think they operate within an uptime of a certain percentage or an OEE of a certain percentage. And all of a sudden, look, no, you kind of, at 50% of what you thought it was. There's a shock immediately when that happens. And sometimes if this is not well explained, can even lead to a lot of problems. But yeah, the visibility is like, all of a sudden you're giving them a pair of glasses and they can really see what they were not able to see before. Again, we're talking about companies that go from no system into an MES. Of course, there's all sorts of degrees of variation depending on what they have and what they want to go into and the stage at which the factory is.
Is that the best suited, I guess, scenario for you is to go into Greenfield, or is brownfield somewhere that you can kind of be implemented in?
It's an interesting question. I mean, greenfields are definitely easier because you're planning things on a white canvas and you're just trying to determine how things should work. So it's definitely easier because the brownfields require you to understand what happens to the current status quo of systems. And again, I'm talking about systems in general, may not be just software, but systems in general and what they need to develop into. Well, I think that sometimes the brownfields are better in the sense of they went through some of those maturity cycles that I talked about before, right? They already know what worked, what did not work, and they can really appreciate when something provides much better results than before. So that's the good part of the brownfields. The bad part is that obviously they will try to mimic their old systems. There's people that have worked on some of those software solutions for their entire time, for many years, and all of a sudden it's like their baby, and they need to send it away and replace it for something else. The complexity about these systems, and especially non-documented interfaces between all of these, is tremendous. So it's much harder, but I think quite rewarding once you see the results that are achievable under those circumstances.
How do you bring someone along that journey?
I don't know. Look, we show them what's possible. That's basically it, right? So again, coming back to that envisioning area, it's really an important one because we don't want to start. And again, in software industry, you have this type of very waterfall-ish kind of environments in which the customer says, okay, so I have here my requirement spec, and now you need to push your product into, coming up with what we need and wrote down. And we tell them, okay, hold off, you'll revisit that at some point. But for now, let's try to simply map your factory into this. And this allows them to say, well, and they say it's great that we have done that because there was many things that we put there in requirements that made absolutely no sense, and second, this unlocked a lot of ideas which are even of higher value that we may go into. And so that's how we help them trying to come up with a journey that they have to go through. But then there's multiple complexities, right? Just because you have the people that are doing this, but then you have management levels and you have investments, because none of this is cheap. And I'm not talking about even the cost of the software, but just the time of people that need to be dedicated to this from both sides, both from the whatever vendor, partner, system integrator, and the internal people. It's a costly exercise. And so sometimes this is also one of the gaps. Sometimes they don't really understand the amount of commitment that they have to put in place to get to the results that they want. But we go through and we learn, and everyone learns with this, and hopefully we get then to great results at some point.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, Francisco, to ask you that a lot of these customers, brownfields especially, when they look at how can they improve their processes, they understand that MES is part of it, and they'll go on an education themselves. They'll look online, talk to large vendors who play in this space. And I imagine you come in somewhere in the middle of that to talk to them as well. How much of that is re-education on what have they overestimated or underestimated when you see them or talk to them? What have they, to help, I suppose, realign? You mentioned the waterfall aspect. What other things that you have to re-educate them on?
It's a really good question because it is changing. It is changing tremendously. So in the past, you had different MES systems, and basically all that you could get would be the brochures, the flyers, whatever was on their websites, and you try to study based on those. At the same time, you probably try to look into analyst firms that would assess different systems and solutions. You try to learn also from some of the people that you might know in different industries, what they have done, and you would compose kind of your picture of what it is and how to do things. And then there will be usually a process in which you try to map out the potential contenders, you reach out to them, you build lists, and you go from there. Well, right now, this is one of the areas that is changing the most. Look, in our case, for instance, we just made a few months ago all our documentation public. Okay, and so all of this information is available. The majority of the time, we even have specific content that is made for AI systems, for LLMs to immediately grasp what the system does and what it doesn't, right? And so basically what this means is that today they have much more tools, much more knowledge, even before talking to anyone on the vendor side. Okay, so this is a tremendous transformation. You need, of course, to get to a certain level of, like a vendor to be sufficiently confident that when you're disclosing, it will be for doing you good and not bad. But there's no turning back. There's no, we need to go through this entire process, and so there's a lot that they can do. Are they overestimating or underestimating? Typically, they are underestimating. So it's interesting. So they are underestimating the efforts, but they are sometimes overestimating, let me say, the uniqueness of their processes. And this is something which is quite interesting, which leads many times to that discussion of build versus buy, especially now with AI tools and so on, is that they think, and they're probably right, so their processes are unique. And if you consider all the aspects about their processes, most of the times this is correct, it's true. Now, the problem is that once you start mapping out in a digital format, you need to have a certain level of abstraction of those processes. And once you plug in that level of abstraction, then their processes are likely not that unique anymore. And so they would be better off, frequently trying to use something that has been proven, that has been built over time, has been tested over, huge amount of different customers, rather than building something specifically of their own. Now, this is becoming more challenging over time, again, because of AI. So today I can, go to Claude and build an application with just a bunch of prompts, right? And so this is becoming more complicated. But of course, to go into the enterprise space, in which everything needs to match, everything needs to be sharing a data model. You need to understand not only that, but also the technical debt that you inherit by the things that you are building using AI. So you get to a point in which you need to come to the decision, should I use AI to replace foundational tools, or should I use AI to, based on the foundations, enhance my possibilities? Okay, and that's kind of what we're doing in terms of AI, is trying to show them that, look, we have these great foundations that now you can augment using AI. And so there's a mindset shift which is necessary. But we are really, going through the noise. So the noise today is tremendous. And it's very difficult to pass the right message, get the right awareness to people that this is what it does. But again, it's a wonderful time to be in this business, and also a wonderful time to try to see how this level of technology can really improve what has always been done in a certain way over a long period of time.
So I guess let's dive into the AI conversation here. So what's real now, like of 2026, and what's hype out in the market? What are you seeing?
Well, it's also a very interesting conversation, just because, well, first of all, the AI is real. Okay, so the power of large language models, the intelligence, the pace that is going through is tremendous. Now, the problem is that if you apply AI in different sectors, you have different results. And let me say, some segments or some sectors are more homogeneous. So if you apply, this type of learnings to telecommunications, to the financial world, retail, there's certain homogeneity and data sets available and so on. So, LLMs are pretty good at, and understanding, providing the right insights, taking the right suggestions or decisions, and coming up with the right results. Now, think about manufacturing. The data is different. Data is hidden within systems, within factories, different processes. There's no scale. There's no homogeneity of processes across all these different factories. And so typically, AI is less good at that. Why? Because it does not have access to the right level of data, the right amounts, the right. We talk about this not just having the data, and you need to understand different things. And some of the things are easier to do, which is to understand the semantics of manufacturing. But to get right results, you need to also understand the right ontology, and you have to understand the right context. And these two things are incredibly difficult to do. So basically what this means is that in manufacturing, it's fairly easy to come up with AI-based pilots. And so we can get to pilots, you can get to very impressive demonstrations that you do over the data, right? Especially now, once you get into Agentic, it's really impressive, the demonstrations that you do. But then nothing scales. And nothing is, what I see today is that the majority of those, the vast majority of those, are not in production and will never be in production if we don't change the way we do things. So it's really interesting that even large companies. I was looking a few days ago at a process at Audi, the car maker, right? And Audi there was an interview in which one responsible for this area was saying that they had over 100 different AI initiatives in the company. So talking about really fairly large amount of people dealing with these things, but then none of them is scaling. He said in the interview. None of them is sufficiently good, getting right results and so on, and getting to results, right? And so this is very important, especially manufacturing. There's also a nuance here, which is if you're talking about non-deterministic results that an LLM provides, you always have a certain percentage of potential failures, potential hallucinations, how we call it these days, using LLMs, right? We cannot talk about the percentage of failures in manufacturing. Manufacturing works in different scale. We're talking always about parts per million, right? So we cannot have, amounts of failures like those, right? So basically what this means is that, again, these pilots are not scaling, these pilots are not in production. What we see, what we're doing, and what we're shifting into is, again, we say, and that's why I said in the early beginning that technology is ready, but factories are not. So that's exactly what I mean. So there's no point. The models are really good, but we need to provide them the right information, the right context, the right, sufficient strength so that they can produce the right results. What we're seeing today is there's a lot more acceleration on the design phase. So example, if I want to create a certain amount of automatic processes, I use LLMs and AI to generate those processes how they should work. But then the end result, the one that goes to production, is deterministic, human validated set of rules that behave in a certain way and that can produce the results the way we think those results can be produced. Okay, so there's a difference between using AI during that design phase or using AI in real time with the possible deviations of what a non-deterministic algorithms can produce. And in some areas, this is even more visible. So we're talking, before about some customers we have in Australia in the medical space, right? So they need to be 100% deterministic. So this means that with the same inputs, the algorithm needs to come up with the same outputs. That's what a deterministic thing means. And so this is an absolute must in very regulated environments, especially in medical, with, of course, obvious consequences to patients, right? But again, in general, this is what's happening across the world. So now what we're doing, back to this, is how can we provide the right environment for customers to do this type of design level things? How can we join the areas of equipment integration, IoT, MES, to provide them the right context so that they can come up with the right results. That's the game that we are in, right? But again, once again, there's lots of noise around, and so we need to cut through the noise and try to see what's achievable. And unfortunately, this takes a conversation which is longer than just showing the AI shiny stuff.
Yeah, that's based around AI. Do you think that the more time we spend with it, the more we'll see where it sits in a production floor, whether it's an agent doing abstraction, or you mentioned dynamic process flow, or whatever it is it a matter of time before we start to understand, okay, this is where it fits, or is it something else?
No, it's an amount of time. It's understanding architecture, maturity, solutions that work and at scale. So definitely a matter of time, and I think there's a shift. If you look into even the industry. So I was at a few weeks or months back at Hannover MES. Hannover MES in Europe is the largest industrial trade show. And if I would go into the software area and I would see agents in every booth. And so everyone's talking about agents. There's something technical which is called an MCP, which is how you give access to the data or to the APIs to LLMs. And so every company has an MCP, and every company is showing different things of what it can be done. And then within the last 2-3 months, the conversation is no longer about MCP and so on, but it's about, do I have or not the right context? And so the industry is learning and learning fast on what it takes to get to the right level of results. And there's no time to waste, because the technology cycles are going so fast that, and this is changing even, and I'm sorry to deviate the conversation, but this is changing even how the MES is seen. Because in the past, especially when you have a very large MES program that takes, across multiple plants or something like that, we could be looking at, something that will have, say, an ROI within 5 years or something like that, or even 10 years if you have a significant number of plants. Nobody would buy now something with an ROI that happens within 10 years when the technology cycles are currently below 1 year, right? Because, halfway through, everything that they were building, maybe it has to be trashed and sent away and replaced by something else.
Yeah, it used to be the fact that, people were investing in platforms for 30 years, right? And that was written into their specifications when they were choosing a platform. Now that is pretty irrelevant to be able to be an agile business, to move with the times really quickly. I was listening to an interview with Anthropic's CEO, and he's kind of catching up with us in some respects, that he's no longer kind of writing code anymore. His agents are writing code, but they're targeting loops, right? Like deterministic loops rather than generative AI type of approaches. Whereas we've been doing loop type PLC code for decades because we understand the benefits there. So AI is kind of catching up with that. So we're writing, generative code is now writing those loops, and that's where we're seeing the benefit of rapid development, rather than, letting AI control our plants. That's not really likely to happen anytime soon, especially in the generative space. But creating loops, absolutely, they're going to start jumping on that leaps and bounds.
Yeah, 100%. Fully agree with that.
I guess so. We've talked about AI and utilizing AI. What's the ground platform for that? You've got an IoT type platform. How do you build that context that can then be leveraged by AI?
Okay. So that's really the secret sauce of what we do. Okay? I will guide you through this. But essentially, what we need to do is to first of all capture data, so data that comes from equipment. Use MES data points to enrich this information that comes from equipment. Say, for instance, if you just measuring temperature from a sensor, if you do nothing else, then of course you have the temperature profiles. You may be able to, compare it, see if it's within spec or something like that, but there's very little you can do. Now, if you add information about which equipment it came from, what was the product that was being manufactured at the time, when did it go on maintenance last time, who was the operator that was operating it, and a number of things. And if you enrich all these data points, then at the end you can just, if you think about using AI or machine learning or anything, you can find much easily the root causes for potential problems or ways to improve it, compared to what you could do just analyzing the temperature profiles, right? So that's kind of the first thing which is important. The other thing is that, and this is a conversation that is happening more and more, is that if you simply try to use LLMs and generative AI against your actual systems the way they were built for different purpose, not for AI, right? So you'll have lots of interactions because the LLM will need to try to interpret what's happening there, what's the schema, how the database looks like, how to join information coming from different tables, and so on. And when you're seeing, the number of interactions, the number of tokens that you're burning, the time that it's taking is tremendous. And no matter how smart the model is, right? So today, I was joking that if you go into one of the latest model from Anthropic, if you use the 4.8 in max syncing, you can burn all your credits just by saying hello, right? So you really need to optimize this, and we say this: we optimize the AI workloads. And so the way we optimize the AI workloads is that we spend the efforts of creating large data sets, we call it fat events, right after something happens. So if there's a transaction, we build a lot of things. We build a graph with all the possible relations, and we take a lot of effort on doing that right after a certain event happens, so that we fit into a special type of database that basically then has all the information, so that it's easy for the LLM or an AI to interact with it and get the right level of results. Okay, so that's basically how it works. And so if you provide it enough information, enough context, and now we're talking not in and I'm sorry to go on technical terms, but not on the relational databases that were made for certain purpose, but now on AI or analytic databases in which we have, for instance, much less tables, and tables which are huge in terms of number of columns, and there are column store type of databases and so on. So this is now prepared for these AI workloads, so that they can easily, fetch for some information and get immediately the result out. Then the other thing is that we need to also distinguish what is this type of root cause analysis of some things versus what are indicators. Because if I want to calculate an OEE, then I would rather have the LLM going against a database, which can be a data warehouse where the OEE is already pre-calculated, rather than trying to fetch all the information, trying to see what the OEE formula looks like, and try to calculate it on the fly, right? And so the intelligence is around having different databases with different formats for different purposes, and having the LLM intelligently going through one of the other. Okay, so that's, in a nutshell, what we do there in terms of having AI with having the right foundations for the AI workloads. And what we get by comparing what we can do against an operational database versus something like what we have is the number of tokens that we burn, it's the time it takes, and it's the level of hallucinations that we get. And so the comparison is incredible. Then there's another thing that we do, especially on this thing that we're talking about, design time, is that we're using this type of AI and all the data to create assets which are then deterministic and running in production. And we can do that because of something that today was, or for some time, seemed to be going a little bit, out of fashion, which is low-code solutions. So we have low-code solutions across our entire manufacturing execution system for building user interfaces, for building workflows, for building reports, for building business workflows, all the things, automation and so on. And so now, when we use AI, instead of asking AI to come up with applications, we ask the AI to come up with the metadata, with the configurations for this low code, so that the end solution does not carry technical debt and can be automatically interpreted, executed by the system, and can be automatically upgraded to the future versions. Okay, so this, I just, whatever I can disclose to not disclose our entire strategy, those are the main elements that allows us to focus on AI probably in a different way than what some of the other competitors are doing. But that's how we frame things and how we believe that we can create value to our customers. And so it's interesting that an MES has, we started this conversation by explaining me what an MES is, and I told you it's about process control, it's about this and that. Now it's one more thing, which is how can we have it as the foundation for the AI, which is what we end to do at the end. So
it's
that's
almost it's like you're embracing what's currently there on the company and then adding AI where it makes sense rather than using it to replace some of the functions that already exist or where it makes sense.
Absolutely. And Jason Wang framed this very well by saying, if you have a nail in a hammer, would you use the hammer and have AI use the hammer, or use AI to create a new hammer just for that?
Yes, that's right. In your journey, can you share with Phil and I what's been some of the most outstanding customers you've worked with? Where have you seen it really work well? I know you probably can't disclose much, but it'd be great to understand that something that blew your mind. They go, that was amazing what they're doing.
Well, we got really again, we have a certain focus because we started in the semiconductor space, as I told you, which was the very beginning. Today, what is really blowing our minds away is all the semiconductors that are working for AI. So again, AI again, but now in the products that make AI possible, and we have some of those customers. The complexity of the scaling. So in terms of semiconductor, what we had in the past was kind of a race towards shrinking. So, dimensions which were each time smaller, and getting through some of what we thought were the barriers of physics to do some of the things that are being done. And today with AI, you have not only that, but you have different level of complexity, which is manufacturing related. So instead of trying to shrink things, you start, for instance, stacking different components in different ways. And the implications for MES are tremendous, because in the past, the level of traceability that you needed was in discrete industries, the lot. So you have the lot. The lot is what you need to track. So now when you're carrying, wafers of chips inside, you need to track the die level. And so tracking the die level is a tremendous amount of computational effort. So you need a lot of smart ways to be able to track that to the results that need to be achieved. So that's one of the areas which is more impressive, is what's being done there, and again how we need to evolve our products to support those type of very complex products. So this is one area which has been great. We have other areas which are important. For instance, in the industrial equipment area, which is an area we do more lately, the ability to do true configure to order type of solutions. So one thing is the classical MES on you have your products, you have your bill of materials, you have everything, you need to choose the right things. But now on the configure to order, nothing is pre-done. And so based on a specific order, and this goes very much into the Industry 4.0 thing, which is, all the products are incredibly personalized to the customers. And we have a customer in the US, for instance, in the HVAC space, and they do specialized HVAC structures. And they are specialized in something which is quite lucrative, which is to receive a spec of something which is completely odd and deliver it within a few days. Okay, and because they can do this, of course, they can price their products in a certain way. Now, imagine the complexity of something which is not prepared. The BOM structures are not there. The specifications, the flows, the steps, everything needs to be built specifically for that customer once this is done there. Okay, and so this is another area in which we've been evolving to support those types of environments. So it's, I think there's many different examples in different areas. The one area that is incredibly rewarding to us, and we're talking about that, is the medical space. So the medical space is something that for a lot of time did not evolve the right way because of the stringent regulations that it has. Because there's people's lives at stake and so on, need to follow a certain set of procedures. But if you go into the US FDA rules and so on that needs to be done, lots of manufacturers were doing just based on paper. And so they did not want even to talk about systems for some time because they had to really comply to the FDA rules, right? And all of a sudden you come in with different approaches, and the impact that systems like ours can have on that. I mean, we have customers that have warehouses of paper. We're talking about really, stacked papers, piles of papers everywhere, and special people, the operators that would simply, the only task is to go through the warehouse of paper and fetch the right paper that the authorities or a customer is requesting. Okay, this is how not evolving this is because of the regulations. And so now, the impact that we can create on those customers by what we do is also tremendous. And this is also another area. In this case, we have also kind of an emotional attachment to the wonderful products that they're building. And so it's really good to see how systems can support it and also get out of the burden of paper and bureaucratic work that at the end creates no value.
Yeah, the administrative overhead and governance portion seems to be a very high price to pay for innovation. They do tend to, stack up the paper as you mentioned before. It's definitely an inhibitor there, and but I guess it was all put in place to keep people safe and have traceability. But that governance needs to evolve at the same rate as innovation, which is the gap that everyone is kind of facing at the moment. Is how do you change policies at the same rate as innovation, whether that be government based or even internal policies, because someone's pushing the envelope at some stage to try and break the
and you have attention there, and the tension is real, right? Which is people trying to get AI more into such processes, and the regulation framework not allowing it at all, or not allowing it at all within certain limits, of course, or for certain types of processes, better said. And so it's really interesting. We had, not long ago, the first FDA warning letter for a pharmaceutical company that was using AI in a non, approved way. And it's a really interesting case. It went public. Was the first one, but this shows that this tension will still continue to exist between the technology and the regulatory framework and the manufacturing processes at the end, and companies that need to produce with the right level of safety for patients, but also with the right level of efficiency because at the end it's also a business for them.
This has been an absolute amazing conversation, Francisco. One thing we do like to ask our guests is, what are we learning at the moment? So what are you focused on, maybe that's in your personal life or in your professional development career. What are you learning at the moment? What should other people potentially be learning as well?
Well, I think that we mentioned Industry 4.0 and now AI. The AI, the implications of AI, the way we need to change the way we work is basically what I think about almost every day. It's interesting because every time that there was kind of a technology revolution in the past, right? And I think about this all the time. is that, yes, technology evolution would change the way people would work, would potentially displace some people or some jobs, and then would create others all the time, right? But the thing is, there was time. There was time for this adjustment. And there was time for some companies to still operate the old ways before the technology. There was time for people to gain new skills. There was time for the older generations to keep working the same way, while the newer generations will take the new way of working. Right now, there's nothing of that. There's nothing of that. And so the way we need to adjust within companies, within daily works, within our jobs is really unprecedented. And I have no idea if we're going to be able to do that or not, and how we're going to be able to cope with this change and speed of transformation without severe impacts. And so the impacts, the ones that will be the more advanced, that will be able to seize this type of technologies, and the other ones that will fall behind is tremendous. And we're seeing this even in our company. So people that were tremendously good at what they were doing, even technology people, now all of a sudden, the difficulty that it is for them to adjust to new ways of working. So again, technology cycles always existed. I'm not sure if this is Industry 5.0, 6.0, whatever. But what I know is that the pace that this is happening is something that I don't think we are prepared for. So that's basically what's going through my mind right now. And I don't want to be pessimistic. I'm always an optimistic person. But I think we need to really think and strategize on how we're going to be able to do this, again, without the impacts that I think we'll see sooner than later.
Are you adopting pretty much a team, I suppose, framework around how you use LLM within critical manufacturing within your business?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's spread across all departments, all areas, from product development to consultancy to finance to HR. It's everywhere. And it's very difficult because the LLMs are different, the use cases are different, the proficiency, the AI proficiency levels are also very different from department to department, and how we're able to advance and test and see the early adopters, the more resistant people, the more conservative, the transformation, the explanation that needs to happen. It's kind of a daily job for me and for other people within the company.
Before we wrap up here, Francisco, is there a book or a paper or something that you would recommend operators or engineers or people listening that they should read? Like, you must read this document or book that's really helped you frame this?
Well, I have several. There's there is one, and we did not plan this, right? But I have one here, which is the from Pascal Bonnet, the Agentic Artificial Intelligence. It's kind of a Bible, was a wake up call for me. And this type of books, they have like 1 year before they get outdated. This one is more or less 1 year old right now, but I think the direction that it sets is incredible, and one that I would severely recommend. One that impacted me really a lot, and that's opened up the world of AI to me, on not just the technology part, but mostly what's possible with it, and what are the concerns and the areas that we need to be very careful with, to be able to seize the good things and not having to cope with all the bad things that come with it.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been an awesome conversation, and I want to really, I guess, give you an opportunity maybe to say, how can people reach out to you?
Well, the easiest way is LinkedIn, to reach out to me personally. Yeah, LinkedIn is my way. Just I always like to contact new people and receive questions or schedule conversations. if you relate to the Unplugged IoT podcast, I will get you a response even faster than all the others.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Francisco. We took a lot of information from this session. It was a really good discussion. I'm really glad to hear the journey you've been on. It's really been enlightening for us here. So we really appreciate your time on the Unplugged podcast today.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure.
Awesome. And to everyone in the audience, don't forget to like and subscribe this podcast. And if you're really interested in understanding the latest in and greatest, you check out our website, because we have now launched our IoT newsletter. So please sign up to that for free.